Hi, are you in the process of applying for your indefinite leave to remain in the UK? And are you confused about the documents that you need for your application to apply? Well, in this video, I'm going to be covering exactly the process to apply for indefinite leave to remain, the documents you need, the costs, and the benefits of getting indefinite leave to remain in the UK. And make sure you stick around till the end of the video because I'm going to be sharing my personal experiences and tips on the process and how you should go about it.
Get strong.
Hi there and welcome to my channel, the Nimble Nomad. My name is Arjun, and in this edition we're going to be talking specifically about indefinite leave to remain in the UK and the process to apply for it. So the indefinite leave to remain in the UK is basically permanent residency, or the equivalent of the US green card. It gives you the right to live in the UK permanently, and you never ever have to then reapply for an extension or permission to live in the UK. It also gives you the ability to gain permanent citizenship in the UK, so you get access to a British passport, provided you meet all the criteria and requirements. And through the indefinite leave to remain, you can apply for any job or the ability to study in the UK should you desire to do so. So in this video specifically, we're going to be talking about what are the requirements for getting ILR, what specific documents you need for your application, what are the costs associated with getting an ILR, and what are the benefits. And at the end of this video, I'm going to be talking about my personal experience with applying for the ILR and some top tips that you may want to consider in preparation for the ILR application. Now, before I get into the video, I just want to clarify that I am not a certified immigration advisor. If you are, in the process of applying and are unsure about what documents you need to submit, I highly recommend that you do your own research or contact the British Home Office and the Immigration Office for specific advice, or seek professional help if you need any. Okay, so what are the requirements for getting an indefinite leave to remain in the UK? So in order to get indefinite leave to remain in the UK, provided you are on a Tier 2 General Sportsperson or Minister of Religion visa, if you spend 5 years continuously on either one of these visas in the UK, you will be eligible for indefinite leave to remain in the UK. The caveat is that within those 5 years that you have not spent more than 180 days outside of the UK. If you do that, then the clock resets and then you need to recount the 5 years from the point that you were not within the country for X number of days, essentially. That's the primary criteria. Of course, you've got other aspects that you need to meet, which are you've not committed a crime and you've paid all your taxes on time, and the usual stuff that they look at just to make sure you're a law-abiding citizen, essentially. Right, so let's look at what documents you need for your ILR application. So I'm just going to run through the summary of documents that you need for your ILR application, and then I will provide you some specific examples of the documents that I provided, just so you can see what was provided for each one of these. So the first one is evidence of your immigration status. Now, this is not your BRP application, BRP permit. I was quite confused about this myself. I will show you specifically what it is that you need to provide here once we get into it. The next bit is the declaration documents that support your application form. So these are a couple of forms that you can download as part of your application on the government website that basically say, one, the government can perform checks on you as a result of the documents that you are providing. And then the second bit is, if in case you are providing any documents that look at that are shared between another individual, such as your spouse, through providing a joint bank account, then it's a declaration form that needs to be signed by the relevant family member or person to validate that the government can perform the background verification and handle data in relation to that specific individual in addition to you as part of the application process. The next bit is a copy of your recent payslip. You just need 1 month's payslip, and you need a bank account statement to where your salary or where the amount stipulated in that payslip is getting paid. Both of these documents need to have been generated within 30 days of your application appointment. I will sort of run through the specifics of this again a little later. You also need a document from the sponsor of your Tier 2 visa. Now, this document will specifically stipulate that you are still required in your employment, what your employment is, what your current pay is, and it needs to align with the pay slip that you're providing, and whether your pay at the moment is in line with requirements for your job type. So there's a SOC code. I'll explain this shortly, but it basically needs to align with that requirement of that job type as per government guidelines. Finally, if you're on maternity, paternity leave, or if you've been furloughed and your salary has reduced than what it originally is per your contract, then you need to explain, or that the letter needs to explain what your original salary was before this happened. You also need a set of documents which stipulate that you can speak English and read and write English to the requirements of the UK government standard, and also whether you have the necessary education requirements in order as per the UK standard. So there's many ways of doing this, but I mean, I opted to get a certificate through NARIC, which is a certified agency for the Home Office, and they process your education documents such as your undergraduate and postgraduate degree certificates, and they, through their due diligence process, certify that you have the required English level, speaking level capability to live and work in the UK. Finally, you also need your biometric permit, the existing one, which is valid, and then all previous passports and travel documents that you've used to enter and remain in the UK. So this can be dependent on if you've had multiple documents or multiple passports that you've used in the last 5 years, then you may need to provide both or all of those passports and documents as required. Now, I just want to add to all of this documentation, you have a prerequisite that you need to have passed a Life in the UK test. Now, this is not a document per se that you need to provide, as in you don't need to provide the pass certificate specifically, but it's a test requirement. So this is a test which has 24 questions, all about history, culture, basic facts and general knowledge about the UK. And you need to have passed this test. You need to get 18 out of the 24 questions that you answer on the test correct, and pass this before you submit your application for indefinite leave to remain. Finally, I just want to say that all of these documents are uploaded in soft copy. So as part of the application process, the process is privatized and is managed by a third party. So all of the documents will need to actually be uploaded in soft copy. You don't need to actually send anything to the government or anything like that. You retain all of the documents with yourself through the process. So let's kind of get into specific examples of the documents that I've referred to above through my own personal experience. I'll show you what kind of documents I submitted and what they looked like. So the first one is proof of immigration. So as I said, this is not your BRP, but it is basically a document which was submitted by or sent to you by the Home Office for some of your visa applications. So if as part of your visa application, or your tier 2 visa, you will have probably extended your tier 2 general visa or your tier 2 visa in as part during the 5 years, because I don't think they give you a full 5 years unless you applied for it right at the outset. So this is basically just proof that the existing visa that you have, or the tier 2 visa that you're living in the UK on, has been provided to you by the Home Office and it was approved. And it can be the original application that you submitted, so keeping that document with you is really important. Or it can be a document that has been provided as part of the extension. So I submitted this, but I mean, it's not your BRP, a copy of your BRP card, but I submitted that as well just in case, because I wasn't sure what they were after. When I called them, they were quite unclear about it, so I just submitted both the documents. So the next ones are the declaration form. So this is just an example. It's straightforward. Basically, the document is saying that you're giving the Home Office consent for them to validate your application form details and all the information that you've provided within the application form. There's nothing new or different here. There'll be multiple copies of this depending on your application type that you might want to consider. So there's part 2 and part 3 where relevant you need to apply this. I think for me it was part 2 was relevant because I was providing documentation which included my spouse, so I had to get the form signed by her as well because we have a joint account. Depending on your own personal application, this may vary as required. The next one is your payslip and bank statement. I'm obviously not going to show you this because it has some very, very private details in there. But basically what you need to keep in mind is, so 2 things, right? So your payslip needs to include your full salary, right? What is it that you are contracted to be paid? So if you're getting paid, let's say, in theory, £1,000 a month, then you need to have £1,000 being reflected on your payslip, and that needs to then map to the employment letter that I'm going to talk about in a second. If you are for some reason on a maternity or paternity leave, then your salary may have been reduced, so you need to have another payslip before you went on maternity paternity leave, if that's not the latest one, with the full salary. So if you went on maternity leave a year ago and you're on a reduced salary or not getting paid, then you need to provide the last payslip where you had the full payment credited to your bank account. The next bit is your bank statement. So that needs to correlate and needs to be printed and dated within 30 days of your appointment, and needs to include a reflection of the salary that you're stipulating on this payslip with that. So I think the condition that if you're providing an alternate payslip which is dated more than 1 month ago, then you need to provide bank statements to validate that accordingly. The next bit is an employment letter. So in my case, I had left a company, so I changed jobs whilst I was on a tier 2 visa. So this is a letter from my employer, my first employer through which I came to the UK on. It basically states, sorry, I've had to redact a lot of the information because there was quite a bit of sensitive information on here, but it basically states, I was working with company X and I was employed from period A to B, and during this, period when I was working with the company, I was employed as a specific role. So it articulates what my role was, and then what was my salary during this period, and any bonuses I received. Now the other bit that you have to keep in mind, and this is really, really important, is you need to know what your SOC code is. So the SOC code is, so based on the job that you've come on your tier 2 visa, there will be a SOC code. Usually you can find this SOC code on your certificate of sponsorship, and so my certificate of sponsorship said exactly this. I had this SOC code available to me, and what you need to make sure is that this letter reflects that your salary is above the minimum recommendation by the UKBA, UK Border Agency, for this particular SOC code or job type. Now, the next thing is you need to have an outline of in the document how many days you were on leave and what was your entitlement. So what the period of days was. So I've obviously not shown the specifics, but they can include this table as part of the letter. And this is quite important. The bit that's the most important is that you need to make sure you get this letter dated and signed off in wet ink 30 days before the appointment date. So you can't have this 6 months before the appointment that you have, because the agency will not, the home office will not accept this letter. So make sure you have this done, because this is really, really critical or important. The other bit that I want to highlight is that as part of your employment letter, you need to have a breakdown of all business related travel. So if your job requires you to travel, then you need, and you've had to go out of the country, then you need to basically have a table which says, from what date to what date you were out of the country, and which country you were visiting, and how many days were you outside the country for. This is a bit challenging because you have to do this for 5 years, and you also have to include any leave, if you've got any leave that you were traveling for, and how many days you were outside for. So this is the most difficult to sort of consolidate, and it takes a lot of time. So I'll provide some tips at the end of it, but I suggest you basically make a list of this, as you go along, or as you start spending time in the UK. And you need to provide this to your company. Your company is not going to have this readily to hand or available. So you need to be ready to provide this to them when you're requesting your employment letter from them. The next bit is the NARIC letter that I was talking about, my education and English certification. So basically here I've shown the certificates that I got for my postgraduate degree. Basically it's got an academic qualification level statement and an English language proficiency statement. So they say in the academic level that I have a master's degree, when it was awarded, what was the title, which university it was from, and they have some unique references in there, and it's all authorized and on behalf of the Home Office. The next bit also is my English language proficiency statement. There are different levels. I think it's A1, B1, C1, and there's multiple grades within it as well, but you need to have a minimum of, I think, B1, I think. So I because I'm providing the one in Japan, they gave me the minimum one. If I provided the India documents as well, which I did actually, then I got a C1. So C is actually higher and A is lower. It's weird. But that's how it works. You can do this just for one of your degrees, or you can do it for all your degrees. I just got all of mine done because it's a standard process, and you need to allocate enough time for this. It takes about 2 weeks as part of their SLAs to provide this documentation. So now let's look at the costs for the indefinite leave to remain in the UK. So basically, your indefinite leave to remain in the UK is not cheap, right? That is the bottom line. It costs about £2,389. That was my own personal experience whilst I was applying. And last when I checked, this has not changed in order to apply for the basic application. So this is just the application form. Now, once you submit this, and when you're about to hit, let's book my appointment on the website, there is going to be an option to go for a standard process, or there's a priority process. So if you went for the standard process, and it says explicitly on the website, it will take about 6 months for the Home Office to process your application. Now that's a long time, right? And when you're in the process of applying, you cannot leave the UK. Now I used to travel quite a bit with my job, and just generally on holiday. So I couldn't wait for 6 months of not traveling. And if you've got a personal emergency or your personal circumstances require you to travel, then this may not be feasible. So there's a priority option, and that costs an extra £800 for the priority option to kick in. So that brings your total application to £3,238. And if you choose this option, then the Home Office will process your application form within 5 working days and provide you with an indefinite leave to remain permit, a BRP card, in 2 weeks' time, essentially. So that's the cost of the Home Office, for processing indefinite leave to remain. There are no other, thankfully there are no, NHS, IHS fees or health surcharges that you need to pay. So that's kind of nice, but it's still really, really expensive. Right, so now let's look at what the benefits of the indefinite leave to remain in the UK are. So the obvious one, as I stated right at the beginning of the video, was that you have now officially the right to remain in the UK and live in the UK permanently for as long as you need to. There's no more visa extensions or requirements for you to extend your visas, or the indefinite leave to remain. The second bit is you have the right to citizenship. So after 12 months after you get your indefinite leave to remain, you will be eligible to apply for a British passport, right? So, provided you can have dual passports, you can hold your home country's passport and a British passport. If not, like in my case, then you can only hold one passport. But that's a real advantage, especially when you want to travel, or if you want to, if you've got a restrictive passport like I did, then this really helps. The other bit, and this for me personally is really important, is the fact that you can actually change as many jobs as you want to. So, if you're not happy at your existing job, once you have your indefinite leave to remain, you will be eligible to apply for whatever job that you want to, and work wherever you want to, and have as many jobs as you want, as long as they meet the legal requirements in the country. And then finally, you can also collect state benefits. So you can collect benefits such as unemployment. For unemployment, you can collect the state pension when you retire in the UK. The other added advantage with having an indefinite leave to remain is that banks and credit agencies view you favorably. So you are eligible to basically get preferential interest rates on mortgages, on home loans, on car loans, and just generally you get access to things that you wouldn't otherwise, just because now you're a permanent resident in the UK. So thanks for staying with me on the video until this point. I'm going to share my top 4 tips for applying for your indefinite leave to remain. So point number 1 is give yourself enough time and start preparing for the application as early as possible. So, in my case, I started preparing for my application almost 2 years before my indefinite leave to remain. Now, you might think that's a bit crazy, but and over planning and over egging it, but it's not. The process requires a lot of documentation and validation. So the more prepared you are, the easier it is. So, and I can give you specific examples, right? So, for example, preparing the entire travel history for 5 years actually takes a lot of time. So, I did a initial exercise where I had a couple of years where I hadn't recorded my travel history, and I was traveling a lot with work, like almost 7 or 8 times a year. And so basically I recorded all of that travel history and consolidated it. And then after that, every year I would diligently record my travel for both work and personal reasons every single year on a regular basis. You also need to give yourself enough time to actually study for the Life in the UK test and pass the test. It's not easy for a lot of people. If you're from a Commonwealth country or from a former British colony, it becomes easier, but it's not always easy. So you need to factor in time for all of these different things and collating the documentation together. The next point that I'm going to talk about is submitting documentation. So submit all the documents that you possibly feel are relevant to support your ILR application. So it's not as simple as just submit what they're asking for. I feel in this case, more is better, right? So as I said before, the whole process for applying is streamlined in that you just need to upload soft copies of the documents online. So I think in this case you can submit all the documents that they're obviously requesting for, but if you feel that there's other documents or other supplementary documentation that that might help your visa application, then by all means just upload it. There's no limit on how many documents that you can upload onto the application portal basically. I personally feel in this case more is better. So next thing I want to talk about is the time required to upload documentation. Now you might think that uploading soft copies of documents, as I mentioned, is quite easy, but I think you need to give yourself enough time to scan the documents and upload them onto your application portal well in advance of your appointment date. And I say this because one, the document requirements are often not clear, and you can easily miss a document here and there, and you don't want to be fiddling around with documents the night before your appointment. The next bit is that the portal has very specific requirements on the size of the actual image or PDF file that you're uploading. So if the file size is too large, then the portal will reject it, and that then means that you need to break down the document and scan it in multiple parts and then upload it, and that can often take a lot of time. So I would give yourself enough time before the appointment. So in my case, I started doing it at least 4 weeks before the actual appointment date. And so the final bit that I want to give you, my piece of advice is that, as I said, all the documents need to be uploaded in soft copy, and you don't actually physically send anything to the Home Office. But on the day of your appointment, when you actually go to the third-party center, and you have to provide your BRP and your fingerprints for the BRP, I recommend you take all the hard copies, like absolutely every single thing that you need or you feel is relevant for your application form. Because what can happen is sometimes when you upload the documents, it can be a scenario that the document quality as it's been scanned and uploaded is not great, and that can cause problems. So when you go there, they can scan it for you if it's not great, or if the size is not correctly been captured, or the image is not showing correctly on the application form. So that's kind of it from me on this video. I just like to get your thoughts if I've missed anything, and what you feel is really important as part of the ILR application form, and what your personal experience has been with the application form. Did you find it really challenging? Are there specific things that you're concerned about or haven't done well? Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell on this channel if you like this video, and I'll keep coming back with more great content as we continue. So I'll see you next time. Thanks.